I should be able to see them now. So the second draw of questions from here.
Okay, so there's a good question about the rebound effect. How can the contractor prevent a rebound effect? That is very tricky. It's certainly not guaranteed to avoid it. One element is that you're not dealing with individual properties. You aggregate the improvement across a whole estate, so that where some properties you might not necessarily see the resident making the energy savings that you're hoping for because they've been underheating the property. You might come the other way where people were actually substantially overheating the property, spending a lot of money. So you might get more balance between that. I think also at the initial stage, it's the profiling of the stock type. So we're not saying that we're there and we've solved the problem. What we want to do is we want to look at what are the most likely typologies in which this will work. Is there a so ones where we're pretty certain that you can make those energy gain, where we think that the people aren't necessarily underheating their homes or in fuel poverty, or if they are in fuel poverty, that there's significant scope for improvement, but not likelihood of a huge rebound effect. Basically, it's going to be about ongoing monitoring of the pilots and the prototype schemes, because obviously some of the properties that they've dealt with in the Netherlands have what we'd expect to be higher energy performance than those that we might find in the UK. That they have a higher average performance. So that would be the answer around the rebound effect. In terms of is there a knowledge base of energy-strong cases, there is not at the moment. The Dutch Platform 31 in the Netherlands hold most of the data around that. They've got the highest level of knowledge because they're actually doing this at the moment. We're currently looking at the adaptation in the UK, so it might be a case of talking to some of the colleagues in the Netherlands. The upfront cost compared to more conservative improvements, so is the upfront cost consistent with a cost-optimal approach, and can it be applied in theory to any dwelling or building? It is a higher upfront cost because obviously you're paying for the entire retrofit at once, but obviously what you gain through that is an economy of scale. You're not bringing scaffolding back onto the site every 5 years. You're not having travel time for workmen. You gain all of the energy saving in one go, so that you get that higher accumulation. And what you have to, in terms of cost optimality, it is the tricky bit is finding that sufficient level of funding to make that level of improvement, make all those fabric first improvements in one go. It's also saves cost in terms of disruption to residents as well. But that's where the pay-as-you-save mechanism, the financial mechanism, becomes really crucial, because that's what unlocks that more substantial element of funding that you would otherwise not be able to get access to. And in theory, yes, it could be applied on any dwelling or building. Obviously, the technical solution becomes much more complex the higher that you go. And that's why we want to start, in principle, with the sort of the low-hanging fruit, with the terraces and the low-rise. So those would be the sort of main elements of that. And what's the drawbacks of energy strong? That's an interesting one. One is risk around the contract, around working with the contractor, making sure that you're actually the big one is you have to change a lot of mentality. This is almost one of the biggest things they found in the Netherlands, is changing the mentality between how the contractors and how the suppliers and how the housing associations work. They're changing from a very different model, and that requires quite a sizable shift in it. One of the other drawbacks is, in principle, industrialization. It will create new jobs, but it may also lead to some loss of employment in other areas, some of the more traditional areas. So that's one risk around it. But there aren't many drawbacks to it as an approach. I think but it does require a number of different elements coming together at once to deliver this. And let's see, although the monthly bill is guaranteed, I imagine it would increase rent prices because of the initial refurbishment cost. How social housing can manage refurbishment and limit an increasing rent price in the Netherlands. So the way that this works is that the workaround for this is that the housing association becomes the energy supplier. So the tenant has an energy contract with the housing association, for which they pay their energy bills, and out of that fixed cost that would be based on their pre-existing energy use, so I'm paying €90 a month or whatever, I continue to pay €90 a month, but over a longer defined period, and I get access to far more energy. And out of that, the housing association then takes €45 a month to cover the cost of the retrofit over the cycle. Those obviously aren't real figures, but that's an illustration of how it works. So it doesn't actually increase rent prices because the money that you use to pay for the retrofit comes out of the bill. And the last question I can see there is that I mentioned heat pumps as part of the refurbishment. Is electric heating also considered in conjunction with solar PV? Yes, in some properties it is. This again becomes part of the fact that what you're doing is you're contracting on those four key parameters: the financials, the affordability, the length of time to deliver, and the meeting the net zero targets. If the contractor feels that electric heating in conjunction with the solar PV is the most efficient way to deliver that, they can demonstrate that, fine. So it's not about a specification of you will use X or Y product. That is for the contractor to provide the most efficient, reliable, and effective solution. So I think that's all of them. Hopefully that's covered everyone's questions, and does anyone have anything else they'd like to add? And if not, I think we will hand over to